Hey, was that good for you? Was that excited? Happy Tuesday.
That was great, but
Welcome
you
to
need a third word.
welcome to another edition of Hangout and Talk Twins baseball. And by Twins baseball, we mean a nothing about the Minnesota Twins. Right, iTunes? Um, are you with me tonight, Seth, or what?
I'm here. I'm sitting right here. I don't know. Can you see me?
Yeah, I mean, you got this look like that dude's crazy. Is it my tattoo?
You do look pretty tough now with that heart tattoo on your neck. You and John Rout could start a gang or something like that.
That would be all right. For those of you that can't see or that can, it's a temporary tattoo. It says love, and I got it tonight at my daughter's dance thing. So enough about that. Seth, how you doing?
You're just starting by pulling at our listeners' heartstrings right there. You know, a dad at his daughter's dance recital getting a tattoo with the word love. I mean, what more can a guy want?
I know. That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm coming at you from a different angle.
Yeah. Us parents, I tell you, what we do for our kids.
Exactly. Let's move on.
Let's do that. I was going to start talking about my daughter's birthday party, but I was like, yeah, I don't know if I want to get into that.
For those of you that are listening or watching, Seth's daughter and my daughter were born exactly 7 days apart.
Yeah, we didn't even know each other, in case anyone was wondering. There were no plans for this to have happened.
If that's not a sign.
Yeah, I mean, they were almost twins, and we didn't hang out, so maybe a twins hangout or something.
That's true. I think that's the route that we're going to make this go. Hang out and talk twins. Talk about our kids.
Okay, we need more listeners, not no listeners.
We're getting more listeners. It's like doubled since we started talking about children. That's legitimately the truth.
All right, then.
Okay, anyway, thanks for joining us. You can ask questions on our Google page if you feel so inclined to do so. Send us questions on Twitter. Send us questions on Twins Daily. Any of those things work just fantastic. You may also find our show on iTunes. Still, we made it. And we have another page that's linked to Libsyn where we upload our audio afterwards. So find us many, many different ways. Talk to Seth at Seth Tweets. He tweets quite often. Or find me at Jeremy Nagart.
But speaking of things that
do all those things.
Speaking of things that don't work so well, like my laptop, people may notice a little different. I'm sitting in a different place. There's my backyard, and there's a tree. Very exciting. That's because my laptop kind of quit working. So I'm going to have to wait till this weekend to get a different laptop because something's not working with it. So I'm on my phone. AJ Pedersen's done this when he's been on before, and hopefully this will work. So any feedback from anyone listening, let Jeremy know. Yeah, I'm apparently a little bit slow technologically, so hopefully this works well.
Well, for those of you that are not aware, Seth lives somewhere between, I think, one Canadian lake and a very, very northern Minnesota lake. And there's not Best Buys anywhere near there. Is that accurate?
That's very much true, but I will have to make a trip this weekend to likely Grand Forks to get something done.
I have no idea where Grand Forks even is located.
It's in North Dakota.
North Dakota.
North Dakota.
By Fargo.
Quit it.
We've now successfully talked for 5 minutes and not mentioned anything about baseball. The Twins are about to play tonight. They're on their West Coast swing. I think that was a Nelly song at one point. Maybe. So they're going to play a couple against Boys to Men? No, that was
the West Coast swing. Oh wait, that was East Coast.
East Coast slide. I thought it was what they were doing. East Coast swing?
Yeah, it was in Motown, Philly.
Yeah, so someone should Google the lyrics to Motown Philly, and you know what? I'm just gonna do it. Um, Anywho, they're on the West Coast. They're playing 2 at Petco and 3 in San Francisco. Now, I didn't look it up, but I'm fairly certain they were doing a little East Coast fling, is what they were doing.
Oh, I thought it was swing.
We were both wrong.
At least it rhymed.
Swing and fling, they rhyme. Slide, I don't know where that came from. Anywho, 3 at AT&T. That's what it's called in San Francisco, right? Last time they were there, I want to say that the Twins roughed up Madison Bumgarner to the tune of 9 straight hits to start the game. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, I remember that game. And what did they have? 10 in the first inning or something? That was awesome.
But then it was close after that, and then they were brutal for the next 2 games.
Yeah, it's one of those. You think things are going really well, and then you realize it was just one game, and then the next 2 are bad.
So if you're into staying up late and watching West Coast baseball, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, late games. I think tomorrow's actually an 8:10 start for us in the Central Time Zone, so that'll be fun. You can, stay up late and watch a game. Or what you can do right now is you can turn down that TV, turn up the romance and listen to Seth and I.
A little mood lighting going.
Seth also sings, so you might be into that sort of thing by the 10 o'clock hour.
It could happen, no question.
It will happen.
It
All right.
already happened.
So, we signed off last Tuesday night. If you missed us last week, you should look us up because we talked to Steven Gonsalves and Lewis Thorpe. And during our show, 2 Colonels hitters went on the disabled list in a doubleheader. As we speculated, Carlos Avila and Ryan Walker were both promoted. The next day, I believe it was the next afternoon, Oswaldo Arcia's rehab had expired, and they activated and immediately optioned him to Rochester, which shouldn't have been a giant surprise to anybody that's viewed or listened to our show. We kind of speculated that would be the likely move of Ozzy, but there was a lot of people on Twitter that didn't really understand it. Seth, I think you even had some conversation today on Twins Daily and probably throughout the week on Twitter about Arcia getting optioned. What would you like to give us any final resting words?
No, I mean, I just think people overreacted a little bit. The unfortunate thing is he loses the option year, but you'd like to think he isn't going to need another 2 years to, make it and stay. I just think at the time that they needed to make a decision, he hadn't been able to play more than 2 games without his wrist flaring up, and his 20-day rehab was done, so they really didn't have a choice other than to put him on the disabled list, which would have extended that even further. At the time he hadn't done much. Now in the last 4, 5, 6 games, he's on fire. So at this point, I'm like, let's get him up here as soon as we can, which I believe is probably Friday, and that makes it make sense to potentially wait until maybe Monday to get him called up to return to the Twins. So I mean, I think he's close, but I just think it was much ado about nothing because at the time it just made sense.
Yeah, one thing of maybe significance or insignificant note, this would be Arcia's 3rd option year. He had his contract purchased in November of 2011, so 2012 he spent between Fort Myers and New Britain, and then made his big league debut in 2013 and had his 2nd optional assignment that year. Now, I don't know right offhand what the dates are or the count of days, but if you can spend X amount of days on an optional assignment, I want to say it's up to 15 without having that option count. So like Darren Mastriani, for example, was optioned. There was an injury and he was called immediately back up last year, and that's why that option never counted. So there is a possibility yet that even though Arcia is on option on his 3rd optional assignment, that if he's called back up relatively soon, whether due to injury, within the 10-day window, or shortly after that 10-day window expires, that if he's not sent back down for a continual, I think it's like 15 continuous days in the minors, that option doesn't actually count. But like you mentioned, hopefully that doesn't ever come into play. I guess my thing, and I don't know where I had said it, maybe it piggybacked off your thing with the wrist, or maybe it was on Twins Daily or somewhere else, or maybe on Twitter. But I guess my hope is that when they call Arcia up, that it's for good, and he's put wherever his long-term home is going to be. And I think we both watched him play last year, sometimes in right field, sometimes in left field, and never appeared very comfortable in either spot. And I think when Span played in the Dome, there was the baggy, but Span was very athletic. Target field, right field is difficult, and left field is huge. So, what are your thoughts on Arcia? Is it going to be you're coming up your everyday right fielder, you're coming up your everyday left fielder, or are we going to see the Twins flip-flop him like they did previously?
See, I don't like how they do that. I mean, Arcia is a guy who played a little center field at Elizabethton, and really from that point forward, he was a right fielder, and he didn't play any left field in the full season of minor leagues until he got to the big leagues, and all of a sudden he's playing left. And I know you can say, yeah, he's an outfielder, he can play it, but there's a huge difference between left field and right field. When you're that young and you want to play every day, I think he's an adequate right fielder. I think he's subpar as a left fielder. So to me, it's an easy choice. I'd have him in right field every day. And right now, it's not like the Twins have a right fielder that is really a given at this point. You've got Colabello, you've got Parmalee right now. To me, Arcia just comes in and he steps right up. Also, I know I'm kind of jumping out of turn here, but at some point in the next week or two, Josh Willingham's going to come back, and he'll spend time in left field as well. So, I mean, I think with Arcia, he's 23, maybe 24 now. Just throw him in right field and go with it.
Yeah, we can kind of talk about that shortly. I guess the only other transactions to cover are Josh Willingham and Mike Pelfrey both sent to Rochester to begin their rehab. Pelfrey started and wasn't anything special. Didn't have his regular velocity. It was still down. And Willingham, I want to say that first night went 0 for 4, and he's got a couple hits since then. And then most recently, Sunday after the game, as was speculated, not necessarily the move, but Gardy had made it clear that on this West Coast road trip he wanted 13 hitters, and Michael Tonkin was optioned down to Rochester, and Chris Herman was recalled. And really, I mean, I think there were people that, that was when the Arcia thing kind of happened. The alternatives to Herman were Eric Fryer, Pedro Florimon, Oswaldo Arcia, and as far as hitters go, unless you were going to go into Double-A, that was it. So,
well, and Arcia wasn't even an option,
right? So, but I mean, those are the only guys in Triple-A on the 40-man. Arcia is not an option. Are you going to call Florimon back up? That's ridiculous. Are you going to call Eric Fryer up to strictly be a third catcher? That's ridiculous. So even though there are 4 guys, there wasn't really any options. Now, could you make the case that they could have, brought Vargas up? That would have been probably silly in National League Park because he's going to have to play first base, and he's not. So really, who else would you bring up? Anybody?
No, I mean, it was absolutely an easy choice. It had to be Herman. Because Arcia he was unable to be recalled because he is already demoted, and you can't call a guy up for 10 days unless there's an injury. Arcia just wasn't an option. That goes back to your comment earlier about, not losing that option, which I think would be important to be able to maintain if you can. But I just think Arcia will be up when his time is up here, probably sometime either end of this weekend or very soon after. Herman went down to Rochester when he was demoted here about 15 days ago, and he absolutely raked. He hit he hit 400, but he was hitting 500 most of the time. He had, I think, 5 extra base hits. I mean, he did everything you would expect, and I know a lot of people are down on him because he was hitting about 140 or 130 in his time this year with the Twins, but he hit better than that last year, and he's never going to be like a great starting player, but he's going to be just fine off the bench, and he needed probably that 2-week stretch just to, I guess, get his bat back under himself or something. So it was an easy choice, absolutely. I think the other side of that transaction was sending down Michael Tonkin, which, again, to me, was a very easy choice. He, one, hasn't been very good. Yes, he throws hard, and I get that everyone likes him, but really he hasn't had a ton of success above Double-A yet. So it's more, yeah, it has to be more than just about his velocity. I know some said, well, get rid of Guerrero. Well, you know, why? You're not getting hurt by a guy that's coming in the 6th or 7th inning, and you know, you need arms, and let's let Tonkin go get better. You know, so I mean, to me, again, that was a pretty easy choice too. You may disagree.
No, I agreed completely with that one. You know, I saw some people that were on the DFA Burton bandwagon, and listen, Tonkin was a good guy to bring up to pitch low leverage, but the way he was being used and the results that he was getting, it didn't make sense. And I think, you know, he's obviously a phone call away, and he'll be that guy for. Well, you know, maybe he won't be, and that could be another conversation that we can have about the future makeup of the Twins bullpen, because there are going to be a couple things that are upcoming. You know, we cover the past transactions, but as Seth alluded to earlier, there's going to be some upcoming transactions, and I think, you know, really the 3 that are staring us in the face. One is Arcia, who Seth, do you happen to have his stats near you, or do you want me to pull them up real quick?
I don't have them. I think he's just under 300, and I think he's hit 4 home runs in like the last week. So, you know, he's back to where he should be.
Yep, he went 0 for 3 today. So he's currently batting .294 in his last 10 games, .297 overall. Home runs on the 16th, the 18th, the 19th, and also the 13th. So in his last 10 games, he has 10 hits, 4 of them home runs, 3 of them doubles, and 10 runs batted in. Taken 3 walks, and impressive in that he's only struck out 6 times. Because that was kind of his issue with the Twins last year. His OPS over the last 10 games is 11-10. So he's been having some success. So he's obviously one that will be coming up. Josh Willingham DH'd again. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but have all of his games been at DH so far as a rehab as assignment?
No, I saw Twins Daily's Chris Feet tweet, I believe it was within the last day or two, that he had made a really nice diving catch out in left field in one of the games. But I think he DH'd again tonight, and I think that was the one game he has played out in the field.
And his rehab is not going great. At this point, he's 2 for 16. He has 1 double, 1 run batted in, 0 walks, and 6 Ks. OPS at 364. Now, Seth would be very, very quick to point out that if he goes 4 for 4, he's then 6 for 20 and batting 300. So it's a small sample size.
You do know me too well, Jeremy, but at the same time, I mean, if there was one guy that I thought had a good chance of kind of not coming back real strongly in 2014, especially after kind of seeing down in Fort Myers and that, it's definitely Josh Willingham. The bat's really slow. He's not young. You know, I don't know if he's going to get back to anything near what we saw in 2012. Not that he needs to, but certainly needs to be better than what we saw in 2013 in order to provide any value.
The final guy that's going to have a transaction made at some point is everyone's favorite pitcher, Mike Pelfrey. He made his rehab debut on the 16th, went 5 innings, only gave up 1 run, 1 walk, 5 hits, struck out 3. Velocity, as I recall, was in the high 80s. I think maybe it was touching 90, but not the 93s that I think we saw some last year. So 3 guys all were on the opening day roster, and now are not on the roster, but will need to have decisions made. I don't know exactly how long the rehab goes for those guys. I think it might be a little bit different for pitchers, but tell me, look into your crystal ball, Mr. Stows, and tell me what you see happening. I know what I see happening, but I would like to hear what you see happening.
It's tough too because there's a few options. It's tough, honestly, because RCA has to come up, and at that point, one, you're probably not going to DFA Parmalee because you're probably going to lose him this time, either by claim or by him electing free agency. So I don't think it'd be him. If they get through this road trip in the National League, I think it'd be nice, in my opinion, from a roster management standpoint, to keep Chris Herman because I'd want Josmil Pinto in the lineup as much as possible. So I'm not sure on Herman. I think that despite breaking all the April records for RBIs, I think Chris Colabello is a guy that's probably the next guy to go down as of right now. But I also sit here and think Danny Santana, despite putting on a pretty good show so far, isn't playing very much. I get Eduardo Escobar is playing tremendously and needs to be in there at shortstop, and they're kind of going with Hicks right now. And I don't think you'd make Santana your starter. And it brings up another one. Sam Fold at some point is coming off the disabled list. I'd like to see Santana go down if he's not going to play pretty much every day. So, I think to me right now the easy one's Colabello. The second one is probably Herman. I'd like to see Santana sent down, but if they send him down, who's your backup shortstop? It's either Plouffe or Dozier. So, they got to have someone there. Maybe they're waiting for Escobar to cool down, but right now he hasn't done that. And then as for Pelfrey, that's another tough one. Maybe you find a injury with Kevin Correa here, although I don't expect that because he'll be much better, I think, than what we've seen so far. At that point, I think you could see someone like Matt Guerrier DFA'd if there's not a spot available. You don't want to be losing some of these guys like Parmalee if you don't have to, and there's other guys that you're probably okay if you did lose them. So I don't know. Honestly, I think Colabello and Herman would probably be the two that got sent down for RC and Willingham, and I'd say Guerrier probably for Pelfrey. What do you think?
I think Colabello is the first one to go, without a doubt. And if one of the things that I like to consider is that you want to have a right-handed bat, a right-handed DH, or whatever, a bench bat available. Suzuki's going to catch 5 out of 7 days, so Pinto would be that guy that could take Colabello's at bats as a DH if we want to go with the right-handed DH. Colabello, the story's great, but at this point he's in such a rut that it doesn't make sense to continue to run him out there. So I think he goes down for the first guy, whether that's Arcia or whether that's Willingham. After that, like you said, it does get a little tricky. I don't think that I think Parmalee's here to stay. And he's done enough recently.
Very recently.
To prove that. And there's no reason to not bring him up and leave him up. So I guess I would go. The second guy would be Santana. I don't think Herman. Will go down for the simple fact that Gardy's got this irrational fear that if he DHs his catcher and loses his catcher to injury, that he's gonna have to bat a pitcher, which is stupid because it happened like one time when Redmond got hit with a foul ball in the first inning and Maurer was DHing, and he only batted his pitcher like twice that game. But ever since then, he's carried a third catcher. But Herman being a switch hitter, and I don't think that the second move is hard. because I think Santana would go down. And I don't know if you mentioned Nunez as the backup shortstop, but Nunez would be the backup shortstop.
That's true.
So, I mean, I don't see that being an issue. But Sam Fold, who I didn't even mention anything about, mostly because he's still having setbacks, that third one might be a more difficult move, but at the same time, it might just be Chris Herman. So the only other name that I want to mention and see what you think is, what the heck's going on with Jason Kubel?
Striking out a lot.
He's the Jason Kubel that I expected to see.
Yeah, I mean,
remember?
It's like every at bat he's 0-2, and he's taking some strikes and he's swinging it just outside the zone. I mean, the strikeouts were going to be a concern, and we knew they'd be high. But he's in one of those ruts right now where either pitchers are just hitting those corners or just off the corners. But I don't know, maybe he's just not seeing the ball or something. But yeah, he's definitely not putting the ball in contact. Kind of like Colabello did the first month. Both of them did. They just kind of cut down the strikeouts even just a little bit and put the ball in play and made things happen. And right now he's just swinging and missing way too often. I'm
looking at Kubel's game log on Baseball Reference. And since the beginning of May, he struck out 21 times, and that's in about 50 at bats. So that's a fairly high percentage, right?
Yeah, that's a really high percentage. I don't know which Twins Daily writer it was that wrote about him recently, but his percentage was right in that 40% range, which is obviously not good. I mean, if you're going to be up that high, you better be hitting a lot of home runs. Even 30's getting pretty high for the best. And you're right. I don't think he has hit any home runs. So,
yeah. One all year.
It's been interesting. This season's been interesting because the starting pitching was so terrible the first 3 weeks of the season, maybe the first 3 times through the rotation. And then all of a sudden they started being okay. The team was carried in the first month by Colabello and Kubel and Plouffe, and all 3 of those guys are really kind of struggling in May, but the pitching's picked up. The bullpen's been fine. But it's different guys kind of stepping up. Joe Mauer's been better in May than he was in April. Obviously Eduardo Escobar's just been tremendous. Parmalee's come up and been good because Kurt Suzuki has really maintained his fast start, his ability to take good at bats. I mean, he's definitely stepped it up. So I mean, this whole first 42 games or whatever it's been, have been kind of a cycle of who's been good and who's been bad.
As I'm looking at his game log, if you've not been on Baseball Reference recently, I mean, I've never noticed this before. Maybe it's an old thing, but under game logs it shows RBI opportunities, go-ahead hits. It says that Jason Kubel has had 145 plate appearances with RBI opportunities and has 13 runs batted in, and the ML average of players with 145 plate appearances is 15. So he's a little bit lower than that. And then it also shows who's driven him in the most and who he's driven in the most. So he likes to drive in Joe Mauer, and he likes to be driven in by Kurt Suzuki. Worthless stats that just blow my mind.
Yeah, I know. He's a little bit much.
He's driven himself in only once all year.
It's kind of hard to do that. There's really only one way.
Exactly. And he's only done it one time. So before I go on and say, hot dog Seth, you were so right about Jason Kubel, I'm just going to pause.
And I'm just going to smile.
And we're going to stop talking about Jason Kubel. The Mike Pelfrey thing, that's going to be interesting. Because has Sam Deduno pitched well enough to stay in the rotation?
Yes.
Then the question becomes, Has Mike Pelfrey been good enough to displace anybody else in the rotation?
No.
Has Kevin Correa been good enough to keep his spot in the rotation?
Not so far, but it's not any worse than Pelfrey.
Should Trevor May be in the rotation?
These are some tough ones. I would say at this point, no. I think he's had 5 really good starts and 3 pretty not good starts so far. I know that people got annoyed last year with the Kyle Gibson talk of consistency, which was very true because he was really good, then really bad, then really good, then really bad for 12 starts. Trevor May's kind of doing that same thing, so I would say no right now.
Okay, then I'm going to ask you one more question. Is Caleb Thielbar in the big leagues for good?
I don't think that's a given at all. He's got 2 options left. Plus, I mean, I think there's always questions about the second lefty, so to speak. But I also think, he's had probably 2 bad outings in a year and a half. So, I mean, there's really no reason for him to be a question mark at this point.
Okay. So you think we get the Kevin Correa phantom groin injury?
If he's not pitching well, and you mentioned it early, but for pitchers, the DL rehab time is actually 30 days instead of 20 days for position players. So that gives Pelfrey enough time for probably 5, if not 6 starts. And it also gives Correa 4 or 5 or maybe even 6 starts. And, it's one of those things where, yeah, right now it's easy to say, man, it'd be nice if they just flip-flopped them. But, I mean, by that point, Correa may be pitching like he did last year, which is certainly a guy that fits into any rotation.
I'm just going to throw this out. I think I've actually thrown it out before, but I guess my belief is that Mike Pelfrey, at the end of his rehab, isn't going to be one of the best 5 starting pitchers. He's also not going to be one of the best 12 pitchers. Would he accept an option? Because he does have an option left, but would have to approve it. Or, and this is the part that makes sense for me, the Twins can outright him off the roster. He'd have to clear waivers. Nobody's picking up the near, what would it be? It would be a little over $7 million. No, it would be almost $9 million left in his contract.
Yep.
Nobody's picking that up. You've created a 40-man roster spot. He stays in the organization. It's basically Nick Blackburn all over again. And if you need a pitcher, you call him up. The only issue I have with that is if he's starting in Rochester every 5 days, you're not starting somebody else that probably deserves to start in Rochester. Meyer, Darnell, Chris Johnson, Trevor May, Scott Diamond, maybe he's not a guy. But I just outright him off the roster. If he's not better than Kevin Correa when it's time, just outright him. And if someone claims him, well, then you're not out anything.
If nobody claims them, you're out what you'd owe them either way. So, I mean, the risk is no. I mean, there's no risk. I think I wonder, would he have the ability to become a free agent?
I don't think so because he's still under contract.
Right, but he would also. Well, would that be the first time he was DFA'd?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think if he could become a free agent, he probably would because he'd understand that May and Meyer and Darnell and, to some degree maybe Johnson are part of the future, more so than he would be. At the same time, Pelfrey has done more in the big leagues than any of them have. Even if they have much more potential, it doesn't mean that they're going to reach it. And most likely, 3 or 4 of those guys will never do in the big leagues what Mike Pelfrey has done. So having that guy around, maybe he reclaims it, even if it's for a month or two at some point during this season. You know, there's no harm in having a guy like that in your AAA roster. I don't know. I don't see that happening, but I don't see a real good, clean solution, which was the concern in signing him the whole time. I mean, you and I were pretty optimistic and trying to put up a positive front, being like, well, he's going to be better. He's got to be better than he was last year. If he can only be more consistent. He was throwing 95. That breaking pitch was better. The changeup had better control. I mean, those things that we saw late last year we're not seeing to this point, and you'd like to think maybe this 4 or 5 start stint down in Rochester will kind of get some of that back, because he's not as bad as what we saw this year.
Right. The other thing that I think is probably likely is if he makes a couple more starts and his velocity's still down, maybe you let him make that 4th start. So now we're talking 16 days into his rehab. So two weeks, basically 2 weeks from now. If his velocity's still down, you just shut him down and say whatever you need to say, end his rehab there, send him down to Fort Myers to rehab, not in games. He's just on the disabled list. And then when you feel like he might be ready later, you restart that rehab assignment. Yeah, that's all within the rules of the game.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably what would happen.
I think better for his pride and better for, just roster management. But that's, again, and I mean, that's what I've said the whole time. It's competition. Last year, if we were talking about this, we're looking at guys like Cole DeVries, Pedro Hernandez, P.J. Walter. We're looking at guys that obviously were placeholders. And I don't feel that way about Sam Duduno. I certainly don't feel that way about Kyle Gibson, Phil Hughes. Nolasco's not going anywhere, so Correa would be the only guy. And there are other alternatives. We saw Chris Johnson make a spot start. Saw Logan Darnell pitch 3 innings. And we have Trevor May and Alex Meyer just on the other side there.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is those guys, I mean, the purpose in bringing in Correa was, kind of a stopgap for 2 years until Alex Meyer and Trevor May were either close or they knew more about whether or not they'd make it, basically, and it allowed the other guys to be there. I mean, it's not necessarily fun to sign guys like that are number 4, number 5 types of starters, but I mean, it's not like you want to push Alex Meyer or Trevor May up to a situation where they're not going to be able to be successful, and more important, it's not better for them long term. So, I mean, Correa was very good last year. He put up very good numbers for a number 4 starter, and there's no reason to believe that he can't do that again. So, I mean, it's always easy to say, let's call up Meyer, let's call up May, but last year we were clamoring for Kyle Gibson, and did that experience last year, how much did that help him going into this year? And that's a rhetorical question, because maybe it did a little bit, but I also think by the time he got called up, he was pretty well done for the year. So, but I also saw how fans clamored for him, and then as soon as he struggled, a lot of fans gave up on him right away. I mean, is that what people want with Alex Meyer or Trevor May? If they come up and struggle, or are they just going to give up on them too? And that's what's kind of frustrating to me, I guess.
Well, I guess part of it, though, was Kyle Gibson was born in 87. Meyer's born in 90. Trevor May's born late 89. Kyle Gibson's a little bit older. Obviously, he had his arm thing, but
it's kind of a big thing.
What? They all
kind
got
of a
that
big
arm.
thing.
They all got the arm thing. Half the guys flip a coin, right?
Right.
He had that kind of set him back, but he did come out and win the number 5 job this spring. So you got to think that even though you can't pinpoint it or say with certainty that it's right, you got to think that experience that he got last year helped him, right?
See, I think you and I agree with that it did help him to some degree. But there are a lot of fans out there that see those struggles and say, okay, he wasn't as good as we thought he would be. You know what I mean? So I think you and I can say, you know what, yep, he needed those starts. He made his 8-10 starts in the big leagues, and then he got shut down the rest of the year. And then we move forward, with what he learned, whereas a lot of people just, give up on that kind of thing. The other thing, and I know it's a topic that's touchy with me, it's the whole age and prospect thing. Kyle Gibson's 26. He's not like 43, 26. He can still be in the big leagues under his initial contract until he's like 32. I think if Brian Dozier's taught us anything this year is to quit worrying about if a guy gets called up at 22 or 25.
I get it, but at the same point, we wanna look at Kyle Gibson and say, well, there's time to get better, right?
Absolutely.
Do we look at Phil Hughes the same way, who's basically a year older?
I think that's why you and I were excited about bringing him in, even on a 3-year contract after last year.
Absolutely. But, I think at some point, you got to look at a guy and say, if you're bringing a guy up at 20 years old and he's not performing well, he's still only 20. But if you bring a guy up at 26 and he's not performing, yeah, we realized Chris Colabello was who he was, and I think that's the other thing too. With Kyle Gibson, he was the best pitching prospect that the Twins had for a lot of years, and fans knew that, and fans expected him to come up and be Matt Harvey or a number 1 starter. I think people that were realistic knew that that's not who Kyle Gibson was, and that's especially not who we were going to get halfway through the year, especially of a year that he didn't even really dominate AAA baseball. I think we probably would have felt differently if he would have come up before his elbow injury. We would have thought that that got the potential to be a front end of the rotation guy, but he's a solid middle reliever. Or a middle of the rotation starter. If you could forecast things. Say that again.
That's what's interesting to me too, though, is if Gibson didn't have the elbow issue, his first full year in the minor leagues, age 22, he got from Fort Myers to Rochester, and at 23, he was pitching in Rochester and probably would have been in the big leagues by July, if not for the elbow injury that year. So, yeah, he lost 1.5 years or 2 years of development time. So he went from 23 to 25 through no fault of his own. He didn't become a worse pitcher or a worse prospect in my mind. But I get it. Like when I do a prospect ranking, age to level of competition is certainly one of those things. That's why Buxton's number 1 or Sano's number 1. But I'm not going to discount the guy like Vargas because he's a little bit older the last couple of years at his level, or Dozier at 24 at AA. That's not. I don't know. I just think it's a good thing when he was a 4-year college guy. So, this is a discussion we have fairly often, every couple of weeks on here, and it gets me going a little bit. And I apologize because I know most people probably don't care, but I just look at it like. If you're ranking 100 top prospects in the entire world of baseball, sure, the older guy that's 25 isn't going to be in your top 100, but for an individual team, he's probably going to be in your top 10, and those guys can have a solid contribution to a big league roster too.
Right. The difference between Kyle. So I'm just looking at some stats. Kyle Gibson in 2010. Played 3 games in Rochester. Started them all, pitched 15 innings, struck out 9, walked 5, had a whip of 1.08, an extremely small sample. 2011, which was the year that it was shortened, was 3-8 in Rochester with 18 games started. Had a strikeout rate of 8.6 in 95 innings. So he would have made his big league debut likely sometime in 2011. 2013, he comes back, basically pitches the same amount, 6 more innings, has an ERA that's much lower, gives up less hits, gives up more walks, strikes out the same amount essentially in more innings, so his strikeout rate drops. I think that's the thing that have people wondering what his deal is. Like, how come Kyle Gibson doesn't strike anybody out? And really, that's the difference that I guess you think about when you talk number ones versus number threes, or number threes versus number fours. If you don't have a guy that can strike a guy out, he's going to be a back end of the rotation guy. And I'm perfectly content with saying that's where Kyle Gibson fits long term. If he's a number 4 starter in a rotation, you got a pretty good rotation. So
yeah, I mean that's my point. Is we worry so much about the age and the stats and specifically the strikeouts. To be honest, I like watching those strikeouts, but at the same time, I also like looking at the number of walks. I mean, that ratio too. So I mean, there's so much more to it than that. I mean, you look at Gibson, he's not going to be a big strikeout guy in the big leagues because big league guys don't swing and miss very often or as much. And the movement that he gets means that people aren't going to square up the ball on him when he gets going. And I don't think we've seen the best of him either. I mean, I think he can be better. And I'm not saying he's going to suddenly start striking out 8 per 9, but I'd expect him to get into that 6 and 6.5 range. And you can be a solid 3-4 if things go well. I mean, there's a lot of examples of that. So I don't know. I mean, it's not every rotation is going to have, Anibal Sanchez as your number 3 or number 4 starter.
Right. But I would take Gibson at 3 or 4, and I think having Hughes being as good as he is, and having Nolasco, who's going to be there and be decent, and Deduno, this rotation's not as bad as we saw it early in the year. Now, could that turn on a dime? It certainly could. But at least there's alternatives, and I think that's got to be the thing that's best looking forward, is that there's hope, not only at AAA but lower, right? Would you agree? You're the
I think that was your.
What was my point?
I think that was your initial point. Is there are options at AAA, and they're good options, and then somehow we got sidetracked worrying about whether Pelfrey or Correa or 4s and 5s or whatever. But I mean, I think your point is exactly right. If Hughes or Gibson can become a solid number, say 2, one of them could, and Nolasco is basically a 3, and then Hughes and Gibson are a 4. If Alex Meyer can become that 1 sometime in the next 2 or 3 years that we've all hoped, that's a pretty strong rotation. And if Trevor May is able to continue striking out nearly a batter per inning like he's doing in AAA, if he's your number 5, that's pretty good too. And then Logan Darnell, I mean, he doesn't overwhelm me, but he's throwing strikes and getting outs. I mean, there's options that are worth being excited about.
Let's take a spin quick around the minor league action. Did you want to start with Rochester?
Yeah, I'll start with the Red Wings, who played this afternoon, and they lost their home, series finale to Toledo 3-0. Scott Diamond started. He gave up 2 runs in the first, but he settled down and went 7 innings, gave up 3 runs on 6 hits. Didn't walk a batter and struck out 6. A.J. Octor came in, struck out 3 over 2 scoreless innings. The Red Wings had just 6 hits. As we talked about earlier, Josh Willingham, he was 0 for 4. The only player with multi-hits in the game, or more than 1 hit in the game, was Pedro Florimon. He was 2 for 3. He also committed a 6th error, which to me is the number that kind of stands out a little bit about what he's done. His batting average is, quote-unquote, up to 200. He's 6 for 30, but he's actually 6 for his last 17, which would be about, without doing it on a calculator, probably about 350 or 360. So he's definitely come on since that 0 for 13 start. The other thing, Jeremy, I wanted to point out was Scott Diamond has a 6.70 ERA and a record of 2-5 with the Red Wings this year. But in his last 4 starts, his ERA is 4. He's been much better of late. His first few starts were just so bad that it looks a little worse than what it actually is. 2 other notes. It's interesting because this last 8 days, the Red Wings have played against Columbus and Toledo and gone 7-1 with the loss today. Just the week before that, they played Columbus and Toledo in Ohio and went 0-8 in that stretch. So after going 0-8, they won the first 7 of this homestand and then lost today. So it's kind of interesting. And finally, last week when we were talking, Mike Hessman had hit his 399th career home run off of Logan Darnell. Well, today he hit number 400 of his minor league career off of Scott Diamond, which is kind of a pretty interesting milestone, at least.
For sure. 400?
400.
That's exactly 400 more home runs than I've hit.
In the minor leagues?
In any leagues, except for a couple in Little League I hit. But there wasn't a fence. It just went over the creek, and they were like, meh, we'll call it a home run.
It's probably like 375 more than me ever.
Well, you have not only the surfer body, but the home run swing too. For those of you listening, that's Seth doing a surf pose. I think it might have been.
I don't know.
I got the New Britain game up. Won 7-2 this evening, and I got a fantastic performance from Sean Gilmartin, who came over from Atlanta in the Ryan Doma trade. Gilmartin threw 97 pitches, 71 for strikes in 8 innings, gave up only 4 hits, 0 walks. That, for you math people out there, is a whip of .5. 2 earned runs, and struck out 9. Sean Gilmartin did what we call balling today.
But not like crap.
The offense was pretty good up in the 1 through 6 spot. Corey Wimberly batting leadoff, 3 hits, 1 double. Tony Thomas batting second, 2 for 4, 3 runs scored and a double and a stolen base. Nate Hansen, double, 2 hits. Kenny Vargas with 2 hits, batting now .316. 0 strikeouts for the little Poppy. Ronaldo Rodriguez went 0 for 4 in the 5 spot. And Danny Ortiz, after last night's home run, went 3 for 4 with 2 doubles, 2 runs batted in. So those spots accounted for 12 of the 13 hits, 13th coming off the bat of Twins Daily's A.J. Pedersen, who also walked, so reached base twice tonight. Oh, your boy Lester Oliveros struck out 1 in 1 inning. Threw 7 pitches for strikes, threw 8 pitches total. Big time. Are you thinking about it, or? I think Seth is completely shocked by Lester.
You lost me a minute there. You started talking about Lester Oliveros, and I lost you.
Your phone actually blew up when I told you that Lester Oliveros threw 7 strikes out of 8 pitches, struck one guy out. His ERA in the season, Seth, is .95.
Minuscule.
So why is he not in Rochester? That's your guy.
I don't know. I don't get it. Unless they just want him closed in there or something. I don't know. I mean, I'd have him at the big leagues. No, but he should be in Rochester. I mean, it's the A.J. Octor thing, too. I don't know why. I get why he started there, but at some point you move him up, and Octor moved up quickly, and I don't know why Oliveros isn't up in Rochester yet.
Well, because they have Octor. They now have Tonkin. They have Ryan Presley. They have your dude, Johan Pino. They have lefty specialist Aaron Thompson and Edgar Ibarra, and also Matt Hoffman and Dale Iscara. That's why. It's a number thing.
That's a pretty good reason, and that's what happened at the beginning of the year too. Why they started down in New Britain, and I mean the reality is you want him pitching, and he'll pitch frequently in most in more clutch situations in New Britain than he's up in Rochester right now. So why not?
Exactly. Speaking of New Britain, Mark Hamburger and Eddie Rosario should both be coming off of their suspension list here at the end of this week. We can talk about Rosario more when we get to Fort Myers, but it sounds like Hamburger is going to start in New Britain. Have you heard that? Can you confirm that?
I haven't really heard a lot about Hamburger. I was told by one of the three last week that Sunday, this coming Sunday, is the day that they can officially come off the suspended list. I mean, I would expect Hamburger to start in Double-A just because, you know, they have a need there. It'll be interesting to see if he gets an opportunity to start. They've pretty much said through Doogie that Eddie Rosario is going to get some time back in Fort Myers just to hopefully shake some of the rust off like they were planning on doing with Buxton. And then Dallas Gallant, will he go to Fort Myers? Will he go back to Cedar Rapids? I mean, that'll be interesting too. So, yeah, all three of them I think have a chance to, you know, contribute to a team pretty quickly. Obviously, Rosario's the prospect. Hamburger's the guy that's been in the big leagues and is looking to have that comeback year, and Gallant's just looking to be healthy and go a full season here.
Yeah, it's interesting when you mention about New Britain's rotation because they not only have Gil Martin, who spent last year in AAA, but they also have Pat Dean, who spent last year in AAA, part of last year, and Virgil Vasquez, who can basically start anywhere. And then Summers, Rogers, and Duffy, who Duffy just came up from Fort Myers, but three other guys that I think the Twins would at least like to see what they have there, and would be considered prospects to Hamburger.
DJ Baxton, and not to mention DJ Baxtondale on the disabled list as well. So,
right. Anything more for the Rotcats listeners, or are we comfortable moving over to the Fort?
I think we're comfortable with that. I mean, obviously, Reynaldo Rodriguez and Kenys Vargas in the middle of that lineup are kind of carrying the offense right now. Not a lot of offense from the rest of the roster. On a global perspective, I mean, from game to game, you'll get a guy or two who has, you know, a couple extra base hits or something. But Vargas and Rodriguez hitting 3 and 4 or 4 and 5 or whatever they're doing has been pretty impressive for the last month.
Are you content with leaving Vargas there until September and then bringing him up to Minnesota?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see any reason to move him up at this point, unless you're going to release like Brad Nelson, who's hitting about 100 for the Red Wings. If you're going to release him, you know, then the thing is Vargas has to play every day, and he's going to do that in New Britain. I guess without looking and without really having a computer to look at this too much, I mean, I just leave him. You know, again, I don't believe in making moves after a month and a half. I think if you can do this, he only had last year his first full year in any affiliated team, but you know, this is now his second year. I mean, wait till the All-Star break. I don't know. I guess if he's still hitting the way he is right now, there's no reason not to move him up, but I'd suspect he'll hit a slump here at some point, and we'll be wondering if they don't send him back to Fort Myers, you know, at some point.
Yeah, I think he started off relatively slow, so maybe this is just the adjustment that he needed to make, and it'll be interesting to see when he gets in a lineup with Buxton eventually, hopefully, Rosario eventually, hopefully. If his offense takes a step up, having a little more lineup protection, or if you know, what we're seeing now is what we're getting.
I mean, there's a lot to that. I mean, right now he's proven he can do it without really someone hitting behind him, other than Rodriguez. I don't know. I mean, when you get to the big leagues or the higher levels, you realize that those pitchers are going to make the tough pitches, no matter if you're hitting 1 or 9 or 4 or 3 or whatever. So, I mean, I think the value of that guy hitting behind you is a little lessened as you move up. But at the same time, we'll see him score a lot more runs and drive in a lot more runs because you'd like to think those other guys will be getting on base in front of him.
You have Fort Myers there, or you want me to run through it?
No, I got Fort Myers. They won 7-2 over Dunedin. I mean, the story of the game may have been that Jorge Polanco went 0 for 5 to end his 16-game hitting streak, but they did get some offense. Travis Harrison had his 12th and 13th doubles. Shane Turner Stuart Turner hit his second home run of the season, and Nico Goodrum was 1 for 3 with a walk. His 5th triple of the year and his 8th stolen base. Matt Tomshon improved to 3-1. He went 7 innings, gave up just 2 runs on 5 hits and a walk. And then Madison Bohr came on for 2 shutout innings, giving up just 1 hit. I know last week I did a quick story on Matt Tomshon and on David Hurlbut, 2 left-handers that were drafted really late in the draft in, I think, 2011. But have kind of kept moving up, even though they start the season in the bullpen for their respective teams, and then eventually get an opportunity and become one of their team's best starters, and they're doing it again this year, both of them. So, sometimes those unsung, lefties or guys that start the year in the bullpen or starting a utility role but come on throughout the course of the year, when they start doing that from year to year, 2-3 straight years in a row, at some point it means something,
I was just checking my fantasy baseball team, and I'd like to point out that Adam Wainwright pitched a complete game, shutout, struck out 9. Huge. Not as huge as that water bottle, though. Goodness.
I know it is. It's like 1 liter.
How many ounces is that? 64?
Like 24, maybe. I don't know. Maybe someone can tell you in the comments or something. How much is a liter?
You got it right there.
It says liter, and then it says 1.05 quarts. Then it says 0 calories.
Well, there's 128. There's 128 ounces in a gallon. So 32. Like 33 ounces. It looks bigger. If you're watching on YouTube, that bottle looks bigger than 32 ounces. It's like the size of your head.
I know.
Amazing.
Too.
A whole meal of cheese. I'm not even mad.
All
right.
By the way, how did Cedar this afternoon?
Well, that is an excellent question. They got a start from last year's number 1 draft pick, Cole Stewart, who I speculate yesterday maybe Cole Stewart will get to move up to Fort Myers at some time this year, to which Seth disagrees with me profusely. But I'll tell you why I think it after I tell you exactly how he did. Pitched 6 innings. He's on a 75-pitch limit, but 6 innings was pretty deep for him to go. Only gave up 4 hits and 5 total runners with his 1 walk, which makes his whip less than 1, and only gave up 1 run. He did strike out only 3 batters, but lowered his season ERA to 2.21. Alex Marin, if that's how you say it, Murin,
something like
that. Got the win, struck out 3 in 2 innings, 2 hits, 1 earned run. And Todd Van Steensel, another one of Seth's guys, picked up the save, walked 1, gave up 1 hit in 1 inning pitched. Apparently the umpiring wasn't great for the 2nd straight night, and Beloit had their hitting coach maybe get tossed. So anyway, they won 4-2, and the offense didn't do a ton, especially the top half of their lineup, but did get 2 hits from Brian Santee and Ivory Thomas and Carlos Avila. 2 hits apiece. Avila drove in 1. The big hit came from J.D. Williams, who pinch hit and got a 2-run single in the 8th to break the 2-2 tie and give Cedar Rapids the win. They're back to 22-23. Anyway, let's talk about Cole Stewart.
I think that would be a good plan. Now, the question I get most often when it comes to Cole Stewart isn't when will he get called up, but are you worried about his lack of strikeouts? So, Jeremy, are you worried about his lack of strikeouts?
Am I worried about it? You know, I brought it up a couple shows ago because in his first 2 starts, he had 4 strikeouts in 9 innings. In his next 2 starts, he had 9 strikeouts in 11 innings. In his next 2 starts, he had 10 strikeouts in 10.2 innings. But then in his last 2, he's only struck out 6 in 10 innings. So I'm not concerned. And part of me is not concerned for the simple fact that you've mentioned that he's not throwing his slider a ton. Now, I don't know if that's changed through the course of the season, but here's a guy that is new to a ton of baseball. He's thrown 40 innings. I don't think he threw 40 innings in his whole season last year. But the Twins are being very careful with him. He's only walked 11 guys in 40 innings, has only allowed 27 hits in 40 innings, has held his opponents to a 185 batting average in 40 innings. I would like to see him challenge more, but not at the expense of his development. So keep him in Cedar Rapids for the rest of the first half. If he's still pitching like this at the end of the first half, unleash the beast, man. Send him to Fort Myers.
If he's still pitching like this, at that point. But it also, the reasons I'm a little more hesitant to have him called up is, 1, he's not getting hit a lot. 2, he's not throwing his full repertoire of pitches. 3, he's already really young for a league. And 4, the pitch limits, that can be done at any level, but at the same point, let him continue to experience some success. And you're right, if we're past the All-Star break and he's, just 2/3 of whatever his overall season innings limit is, go ahead and call him up. But let's see that strikeout rate continue to go up. Let's see, what we don't see through box scores, and why I'd like to get down to Cedar Rapids soon and kind of see him pitch is what is he throwing? What is he not throwing? What is his strikeout or go-to pitch? Talk to Jake Maurer or Ivan Arteaga about where he's at developmentally. I just think, the other side of it, though, to kind of not disagree with you, the age thing is important in my mind. More important, though, is that it is his first year in full season affiliated ball. There is a lot to that. But at the same time, J.O. Barrios is up in Fort Myers at just about the same age, relatively close. And he's certainly been playing real well and pitching real well of late. So, it's not that he couldn't do it probably, but he's so – you're right. Last year, did he even throw 40 innings in high school ball? I don't think he even came close to that, like 24 or something like that. I'm more worried about the long term with Cole Stewart than I am about getting him to a level that's still 3 levels away from the big leagues.
Barrios is about 6 months older than Cole Stewart, a little less than 6 months older.
Yeah.
Barrios actually turns 20 next Tuesday. And I only know that because we share a birthday. We're like twins, brothers.
Are we going to have a show on your birthday next week?
I think so.
Okay.
Are you going to take a birthday shot for me?
Probably not. I'll take a big guzzle from the big glass. No.
My Aquafina bottle that's the size of my head.
Yeah.
No, I
Yeah.
mean, if the Twins leave him down the whole time, I have no issue with that if they leave him in Fort or in Cedar Rapids all year. Um, and I don't know that I would promote him ahead of Slegers or Eads. Um, but if there's a need for a third pitcher to go from Cedar Rapids to Fort Myers, then it would kind of bother me if he's not the guy.
Yeah.
But what are the
I
chances
guess
they're going to need a third guy?
for me, part of it is more the sense that I think there's a better chance that he gets shut down in August than he gets promoted in August. Whether it's innings or pitches or whatever it is, I get that they're doing a 6-man rotation, but I guess I would think it's more likely that he'll get shut down at some point.
Yeah, he's at 40 innings. I think Berrios threw 100-ish last year. Berrios threw 103. So if you think Stewart's at 40 after 8 starts, that he could conceivably make 12 more starts.
Probably.
Where would that put us in the year?
But the thing is if you're saying he's on a 75 pitch count game to game, he's not going to get through 5 or 6 innings very often.
Right. He's made it through 6 innings twice so far this year. But I'm saying if he's on a similar innings limit as he was with Berrios, we're talking 12 more starts.
Yep.
So April and May, and then June and July. He might make it through the whole year.
He could. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it will depend. And the other thing that they used to always do, and they could do again, is put him on the DL sometime in the mid-season and have him skip 1 start or even 2 starts just to kind of push that back so that if the Colonels are nearing a playoff type of a berth, he could still pitch in the playoffs.
Right. And they did that. I think the Colonels did that last year with Berrios as the playoffs got closer too. Phantom DL'd him and then brought him back, and he made a start in the playoffs. Kind of off Twins topics, but on general baseball topic. I want to say it was John Smoltz. It may not have been, but I want to say it was John Smoltz I was listening to on the radio, and he was discussing how back in the days the pitchers would pitch. There was no pitch limits. There was no innings limits. Pitchers would throw every day. Pitchers would throw all the time. Why wasn't there these elbow problems? Is the breaks in between the games and then ramping it up once every 5 days or 6 days, or in the case where you pitch and then you have 5 days off, so you throw on your second day off and then on your 4th day off, and then you pitch. That you're throwing basically every other day, but you're not throwing like a game like competitively every other day. Is that what the issue is with the elbow? Is it a overcautious thing that when they start letting it fly, that's why they're getting hurt? Do you think we'll see teams starting to change their philosophy on being so cautious with kids when it's the kids typically that are having these major elbow issues?
I mean, it's one of those things where I think everyone's going to have a theory that would make some sense. I mean, you could argue that throwing more like they did in the old days is better. You could argue that throwing less like they're trying to do now is being more protective and trying to keep the pressure off that. I would say it has more to do with specialization and throwing year-round instead of resting those muscles and tendons and all that for the off-season. I think that has more to do with it than anything else. But, I mean, again, that's all just a theory. I mean, like we talked about last week, I kind of wrote about that at Twins Daily. It's just I don't know what the answer is. I do know that they didn't used to do it. David Dorsey writes for the newspaper in Fort Myers, and he wrote a pretty interesting article that the Miracle are going to the 6-man rotation, which, of course, they did in Cedar Rapids last year. But there were quotes from Brad Stile basically saying, too, that we're trying to be as protected as we can because of this situation. And the situation with all of the Tommy John surgeries at all of these various levels is something every team and every organization is trying to find that answer to. The Twins have been affected by it, the Rays, the Braves. I mean, most teams have been affected by it in some way, and I don't think there's just some easy answer for it.
Twins Hangouts, we just got a Twitter message from Steven Gonsalves' dad. Factoid.
Sure.
Kevin Correa and Steven Gonsalves, their grandparents grew up together and still brag about them weekly.
Really?
If that's not the most fantastic fact you ever heard,
Dude, that's right up there.
I don't know what is.
That's good stuff. I mean, man, I thought we had kind of topped out on how cool we were by you asking Gonsalves about being a teammate of Brady Aiken last week. But man, now we got a tie-in between Gonsalves and Correa.
It just doesn't get any better, does it?
I know. And by the way, we should ask. I don't know, but the Twins are in San Diego tonight. I know Gonsalves is from San Diego. Chris Parmley is from San Diego. I know that there were the fires last week in that San Diego area. Hopefully, those families haven't been too affected by that. Which is but
do you follow Gonsalves on Twitter?
Yep.
He was getting, I don't know what family member it was, if it was mom or sister or someone, but he was constantly posting pictures of these fires, and it looked kind of scary. Also, Dustin Morse tweeted earlier tonight that there was a number of people that travel with the Twins that are from California, and their ticket request list was like 165 tickets for tonight's game. That's crazy.
It is, but you consider that Plouffe's family is from there, Parmalee. Well, I'm blanking on names, but I mean a lot of the Twins definitely are not afraid to go after guys from California, and obviously Correa played with the Padres, I believe, for quite some time, and likely I think he may have family and such there too. So, I mean, yeah, it's not really surprising, but there's a lot in that Southern California area that the Twins go after.
Right, Kubal's. I guess I don't know where Kubal's from originally, but obviously Kubal's brother-in-law and wife are from that area.
Kubal's from South Dakota.
Aaron Hicks is from California.
He moved to California when he was like 3 or something like that.
Kubal? Nolasco's a SoCal guy.
Phil Hughes is from down there, I think.
Pretty much everybody.
Yeah.
Swarzak is from wherever
Florida.
Bigfoot might be.
Right.
He's a follower of the Bigfoot. So yeah, I mean there's quite the connection. Fantastic. Did we cover the whole? We covered the whole Cedar Rapids thing, right? Cedar Rapids is up to 22 and 23. It'll be interesting to see what they do because it's expected that both Vilma and Kanzler are activated tomorrow. So I guess my guess would be Avila and I don't even know well enough to make a guess. Seth, do you have a guess on what they do to make room?
Vilma would be sent back to extended spring training because I think with Ryan Walker there now, our assumption was that if Walker would have been hurt to start the season, he would have been the shortstop at Cedar Rapids, with Vilma probably down in EST. So, I mean, I think that's an option as well. But, yeah, I would think Avila would be most likely. He's also from California.
You got to think that maybe a catcher. Right now they have 4 catchers. Garver, Altabelli, Casada, and Santi. I'd probably send one of those bad boys down.
I mean, they could. I mean, Santi was the one that came up most recently, so it could be him as well.
Speaking of catchers, I got a message from Twins_Future24. Wanted us to talk about the lack of catching depth in our system, which I thought was an interesting question because given where the catching depth was 2 or 3 years ago versus where it is now, I would say that there's solid depth. Now, with Pinto up, there's not that guy that's close that's going to make an impact. Just looking at their rosters. Let me get to the right spot here. Fryer and Rolfing. Fryer's on the 40-man. Rolfing has been fantastic in spring training and could probably come up in a pinch, but neither would be long-term solutions in a scenario where you're looking for 2 catchers. I think we're both. It's fair to say that. Double-A, Kyle Knutson, who fits in that same spot as Rolfing, in my opinion, and Matt Coach, who's I really like his bat, and I'll continue to like his bat. But again, I mean, we're talking about guys that have taken their time to get through the system. They don't really project to be everyday catchers. Stuart Turner's really struggled in his first full season, but he's clearly the best Twins prospect that they have right now playing in full season ball. And then down with those guys that we mentioned, Cedar Rapids, Mitch Garver would be Cedar Rapids' best catcher, but he was a college senior, and now he's playing his first year of full season ball. So there's definitely numbers, not to mention that they have a kid by the last name of Silva and Brian Navarretto, both in extended that are going to be decent prospects. But and then Alex Swim, who Baseball America just did a little write-up on. It was actually Phil Miller from the Star Tribune, but just a little write-up on how Alex Swim was probably deserving of being in a full season, but they just don't have the room for him. So I think the depth is there. It's not the high-quality depth that a team like the Braves have, where they have multiple guys projected to be starting catchers in the major leagues. But if you figure Pinto's going to be there for a little bit, and you also have a guy like Stuart Turner coming up, and then other guys that are organizational type guys, as well as Chris Herman, then there's discussion about do you trade or extend Kurt Suzuki. That there seems to be more depth in the system than there's ever been, at least in recent memory.
Yeah, but I think it's also a fair point to say that there's not much ceiling with any of them, other than, in my opinion, Navarretto and maybe Jorge Fernandez, who, although there has been talk about him moving to the outfield, he's also still getting reps at catcher as well at extended spring. But, I mean, the guys, Dan Rolfing's a right-handed version of Chris Herman. And again, I find tremendous value in a guy that's that good of an athlete that he can play, 3 or 4 positions defensively, including catcher. I think Fryer's in that Drew Butera type of a category where maybe not quite as good defensively, but probably a little bit better offensively. These are guys that can come up and be backups, and that's really what we're seeing throughout the system. I really like Knudsen, and I'm not quite as high on Coach's bat maybe as you are, and I know his defense has struggled. I mean, Turner's definitely the top prospect when it comes to the catchers, and most see him more as a backup. But I mean, I think his floor is also Drew Butera. I mean, that's a pretty good floor for a guy too. So, I mean, I can definitely see them, in the next few weeks adding 2-3 more catchers to the draft, maybe even one fairly high, to try to get someone who's going to surprise. Because even I think with their international signings, and correct me if I'm wrong, have they added any catchers and international signings in recent years that are contender prospects?
They added. Let me find him here. They added a kid from Venezuela this past year by the name of Robert Molina. Got a $300,000 bonus, which was one of their bigger bonuses. And Renice Silva from Venezuela the previous year got $175,000. So both of those guys. Well, and then they also have a. They right now have 4 guys in extended that are either just turned 18 or will turn 18 this season, and they're all Venezuelan catchers. So, it's so hard to say. The Molina is not related to the Catching Molina family. I did actually ask that question. It's a different family, but between what they have, that played in the Dominican and what they have in extended in Navarreto, there is some high ceiling younger dudes, but it's such a crapshoot that far away. Navarreto's someone to be excited about, but he's already 19 and hasn't even sniffed full season ball yet. Not that that should matter, right? But he'll turn 20 this off season.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the other part of that question was the Kurt Suzuki question, and I mean, I'm not against bringing him in because I mean, suddenly if he were to go via free agency next year, you would have Josmiel Pinto as the primary catcher with one of those guys that's probably a backup or more appropriately a number 3 or number 4 catcher at the major league level who essentially is in Rochester because of that. So I think, bringing back Suzuki, I don't think it's the time right now. I don't think any of us think he's going to maintain a 300 batting average or a 380, on-base percentage or anything like that. But, he's quality, no question. I think defensively he brings a lot to the table. I think veteranship, if that's a thing, I think he brings a lot to the table. And I think if the Twins, and I think Gardy's always been pretty good about giving guys days off, I think they have a way to probably keep him fresh that he hasn't had in previous years. Oakland burned him out, and if he can play appropriate number of games, I do think that offense can be a little better than what we've seen in the past, but again, not as good as this year. So, I mean, yeah, sure, add another year of him if you want. I mean, there's no reason not to, I guess, at this point, but
there's plenty of reasons not to. You don't need to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying right now. I'm just saying at some point you add him, whether it's after the season. I mean, if he's still hitting this well in August, there's no reason not to actually get him at that point. Because, I mean, there's really nobody else, Yeah, I'm definitely not saying do it today. That'd be silly.
Right, and I agree with that. I'm not I guess for me it all really comes down to where are the Twins when it's July 26th. Are they a team that is within striking distance of the wild card without making a move? The thing that the Twins that they should have this year that they haven't had really before is that, and not really that they needed to, but if they are in contention, especially with pitchers, they could bring up pitchers, Alex Meyer, Trevor May, if they're not up yet, that could kind of reinforce what they're doing. It would be like making a trade. Maybe not hitters as much, but if the Twins are in contention for the wild card, why would you move Kurt Suzuki? When Wieters went down for Baltimore, Jim Bowden from MLB Network Radio suggested that the Orioles should, try to make a move for Kurt Suzuki. Why would the Twins do that? It's dumb talk. It's a guy that doesn't realize that, hey, here's a team that's actually playing okay baseball that might, want their good players for themselves for a year. So Yeah, I mean, at this point, I'm not going to do anything if push comes to shove and the team's 17 games out of it at the end of July and Suzuki's playing okay and has value. Then I definitely look to move him. Um, I'm not going to let this become a Ryan Domit deal where I extend him for 2 years in the end of July and then regret that deal and then end up trading him. Um, but if it's September and he's still on the roster and the team's doing well and you extend him for a year maybe with a team option, I'm all for that. Um, because him and Pinto can be the two catchers for the next 2 years, and there's no issues with that. But I think it's a little premature to have that trade or extend talk because we don't really know what situation the Twins are going to be in. And I think that's obviously the number one focus. If you're not moving guys, don't trade them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I just think that at this point, this is a transition year, and it isn't always just about going with the young guys. I mean, in some cases it is, but in other cases where you don't necessarily have a better option as a young guy, I think Suzuki's a guy that you can add for one more year at some point if you want to. We're just passing the hour and a half mark, and I wanted to jump into, if you're okay with it, some draft talk. And
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Oh, well, here's if I texted you this earlier, but I was chatting with our friend Travis, and he asked the question, and I think it's a very good question. First of all, what is your current top 10 Twins prospects? And right now I've only got my top 7 or 8, but where do some of these top pick candidates fit into your top Twins prospects rankings? And here's where that question comes from and why I think it's a good topic. Right now, I think my top 7 Twins prospects would be Byron Buxton, Miguel Sano, Alex Meyer, Cole Stewart, Jorge Polanco, J.O. Berrios, Eddie Rosario, and maybe Kenneth Vargas sitting at 8 at this point. But the question was, Nick Gordon seems to be the guy that most people know. You did your version 1.0 mock draft at Twins Daily, which everyone should check out and comment on. And we're a little bit different, but most just say Nick Gordon. Where would Nick Gordon rank in your top 10 or top 5, or where would he rank?
Well, I would go. I don't remember exactly what you said. I would go Buxton, Sano, Meyer, Stewart, Polanco as my top 5. Is that what
That's my top 5. Yep.
I would put Gordon after Polanco, before Thorpe and Berrios. So Gordon would be number 6 for me.
Okay. Now 6, I had Berrios, 7, Rosario, 8, Vargas. I put Gordon between Rosario and Vargas. But you know it better than I do, so maybe he's up to 5 or 6. But how does that rank? Now, I guess continuing that discussion, how do the Rodon, Aiken, Kolek, Hoffman, some of those other guys, Jackson, how do they fit into this type of a ranking in your system? Because we talk all the time about best player available, and how does that fit into our prospect ranking if you've got a guy like Gordon, who personally I would have at maybe 8, whereas with Hoffman, I'd probably have him at number 5, even with the Tommy John surgery. So how does that play into the best player available concept?
I would put Aiken and Rodon ahead of Cole Stewart at number 4. And honestly, that comes because of conversations where I've had with people where I've asked them specifically, rate these people in order. And that's where Stewart fell. I personally think that the Astros would be silly to not pick Rodon, even though he didn't have a great year. Season's over, etc., etc. But when I specifically said Aiken, Kolek, Stewart, put them in order, it was Aiken, then it was Stewart, then it was Kolek. And that was how I thought it should be. So as far, and I think that's Cole Stewart, because of where he was drafted. I mean, it's an easy place to just, that's where we're going to start. I don't think anybody would take any of those players that are above, any of the players that we're looking at right now and say, well, we'll put them ahead of Alex Meyer. And I think you might see some national things that do that. Alex Meyer might be a top 30 prospect. You're going to see guys that are drafted placed before that in national rankings. But we've talked about the importance of Alex Meyer to the Minnesota Twins with his proximity to the major leagues. And I think that's why both of us kind of value Alex Meyer more than the national media does in rankings. So I think that Buxton, Sano, and Meyer are safe. If you're asking me about these other 6, I would put the 2 lefty pitchers before Cole Stewart. I might put Alex Jackson before Cole Stewart, which I think might come as a little bit of a shock to people. But I think he's got the type of ceiling that it's going to be one of those guys. He's becoming one of those guys that's similar to Buxton, where you're going to look at him a year from now and say, well, why wasn't he the first guy in the draft? And he could play catcher. I don't know. I mean, that's going to come up to the team. He can play right field, but I think he's just going to be a guy that's a stud quick. So I would put Aiken. I would put Rodon, then Aiken, then Jackson, then Cole Stewart. Cole Stewart was my 4. Then I would put Polanco. Then I would put Kolek. Then I would put Gordon. And I would probably put Berrios, then Nola, then Thorpe in my top 10.
Okay, so let me ask you this: where does Hoffman fit into that?
That's a good question.
As we've talked about,
that I've thought of.
Has become part of what people do, and I don't know that it would necessarily drop him on a prospect ranking when he's still like 21, and he'll be back to full strength, you would hope, by 23, and just starting out. So I mean, he may not make it to the big leagues until say 24, but that, even 25, he can still be pretty good. So that's I guess what I'm trying to ask is, just had the Tommy John. He'll be out the rest of this year and probably a lot of next year, maybe some rehab next year. So in 2016, though, he should be pretty close to back, and his ceiling, in my opinion, is still pretty high.
Yeah, I think, obviously I'm thinking in terms of the 2014-2015 offseason. I would put him in that same group as Berrios and Thorpe, and probably for the simple fact that he's not healthy in the other 2, if they are healthy. I would put him after those 2, which would maybe be a little bit lower. I guess my thing with Hoffman is he's gonna get drafted, healthy or not. He wasn't gonna pitch a ton this year, and then we're looking at next year. Well, like the Royals are doing with Zimmer, they're holding him back. I don't even know if he's made his debut yet because they want to have him healthy for the end of the year. They want to have his innings down. Hoffman could start. It's not that he'll be ready. He'll be full go when short seasons start in June, but he'll be pretty close. That's going to be 13, basically 14 months since surgery, that he could at least start with short season ball, and like you said, be full go by 2016. I guess my thing would be I would probably rank him lower because of the injury, and then see how he reacts next year, and then move him accordingly coming into the 2016 season. But yeah, like you said, his ceiling is high. And the other thing too, and a lot of people just disregarded the Hoffman to the Cubs pick that I had, and obviously we're a couple weeks away. But I was gonna look and didn't. The trade that the Cubs made with the Braves, was that Dempster?
Could be.
They got back Vizcaino, I believe was the kid's name.
Yeah.
And he was a guy that had recently had Tommy John surgery and was rehabbing, but the Braves or the Cubs were comfortable enough in getting him back. He was, if I recall, either the headliner of that deal, or he was a significant piece that they got. And so I don't think the Cubs, when they look at number 4, that they're going to look at it and say, well, geez, we have our choice between a stud, college guy that's going to be ready in a year, or a stud college guy that has Tommy John surgery that's going to be ready in a year. They're going to get basically the same thing that they got before. They're going to roll the dice a little bit. Aaron Nola is a number 3. I mean, he's if that's what the Cubs are going to do, he's a number 3. And like you said, Hoffman has a ceiling that he could be more than a number 3. So that was kind of where I was, one of the angles that I was coming from. But who really knows what Theo and company are thinking?
Well, and that's my point, though. I mean, if the Cubs are thinking like that, and we don't know if they are or aren't, I mean, again, it goes back to upside. And to me, if you're drafting at number 5, do you take a guy like Nick Gordon, who has, I mean, his best tool is his speed. And people think he can stay at shortstop, glove-wise and arm-wise, though I know in the Twins draft they signed Jorge Polanco. They thought the same thing with him. I mean, worst case, he moves to second base like his brother has. But, I mean, Gordon also, there's the question mark with his bat, and if that'll ever play either. And to me, there's just a ton of question marks. The thing with the Tommy John, if Kolek's actually throwing 100 miles an hour, it's going to be just a matter of time before he has Tommy John surgery. And he's going to go in the top 5 or 6. So, I mean, right. I don't know. That risk may not be such.
A couple things. Gordon's top tool is not his speed. He's different than his brother. He's going to stick it short. He's got a cannon. He's more athletic, but not as fast. He's not going to be D. Gordon. He's not going to be a second baseman. He's going to be better than D. Gordon. The funny thing was with the Kolek thing, I talked to someone that's seen him, because there was a report on Perfect Game that he had hit 103. I talked to a guy that had seen him. I said, "Is that true?" He said, "Not that I've seen." And he'd seen Kolek a number of times. And I asked specifically, does that velocity scare you in terms of injury? And his response was, it's very hard to predict injury. Throwing at 69 or 89 is not a natural arm motion. And my response was, yeah, I throw 42 and my shoulder's sore just thinking about it. But it's one of those things that I think this Tommy John epidemic is going to cause teams to think, geez, Tyler Kolek, he might need to be under the knife soon if he's throwing this hard. Like you said, it's a coin flip. Aroldis Chapman throws really hard. He hasn't had it. Right?
That's very true.
So, and I tweeted, I think yesterday or the day before, I think there's a significant chance that Kolek drops. Because these other guys can be viewed as safer picks. Alex Jackson can be viewed as a much safer pick. Even Nick Gordon could be viewed as a much safer pick. And if the teams play it the way that it's going to be, Rodon's going to go in the top. He's going to go 1 or 3. Aiken's going to go. Actually, Rodon's going to go 1 or 2. Aiken's going to go 1 or 3. You could see Alex Jackson as high as 2. If those 3 guys are off the board, who knows what the Cubs do? And very easily, Tyler Kolek is on the board at number 5. And the Twins could be choosing between him and Nick Gordon. And it wouldn't shock me if they went Gordon, but I don't know how the Twins will feel about taking a guy that throws that fast. Is the injury going to play into their mind, even though he's got decent mechanics and not really off-speed stuff? I mean, I don't know. It's going to be an interesting few days when the Twins brass gets together and tries to set their draft board.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I've researched them all in the way that I know you have, or that certainly what Darren Johnson and all of the Twin scouts have done over the last several months. I mean, they're going to be prepared. They're going to have all kinds of reports. And they're probably, who knows, they're probably down to picking between 6 or 7 guys right now, and they probably know 2 or 3 of those just won't be there. So they may be down to, say, 3 to 5 guys that they're really focusing in on over these last couple of weeks. I guess one thing I just point out to those that are still listening at this point, over at Twins Daily, we've kind of started this. Jeremy on Monday posted his first mock draft, and he's going to do a weekly one here leading right up to the draft on June 5th. Today, John started talking about some of the mocks that we've seen from all over the place, starting to get people a little going for that. But starting tomorrow and going forward right up to the day of the draft, we're going to start doing, as we did last year, one prospect profile each day leading up to the draft with guys that are very possibly, if not actual options for the Twins, guys that could be there, and there may or may not be some sort of reason to get to know them a little bit. So we're going to do that, and Jeremy's going to update his mock draft each week, so that'll be interesting as well. And then no one's going to have more draft coverage than Twins Daily. Jeremy's actually going to be available throughout the draft to do some up-to-the-minute type of analysis on the different draft picks. Not just the first round, but rounds 3 through 10 the second day, and maybe even rounds 11 through 40 on the third day. Between he and I think we're going to try to cover that pretty thoroughly. And then I'm hoping to be able to do some stories on whoever the Twins do take in the first round and stuff. So, I mean, definitely go to twinsdaily.com for all kinds of Twins draft coverage. And, as much as there's a lot of people involved, Jeremy's kind of been our spearhead for knowing who we should be writing about, who we should be talking about. He's talking to the right people, learning what he can. So just to throw a little recognition there to you, Jeremy. I mean, I don't know anyone in the area that knows this stuff as well as you do and cares about it as much. To me, that's the bigger part, is you literally care about this and enjoy it. So it's kind of fun to read that kind of information when it's coming from someone who cares about it so much.
Maybe too much.
I often wonder that as well.
Yeah, like why do I care so much?
Why do you?
I don't know. I've always liked drafts. They're just fun. I do a draft contest.
I've told people this too, Jeremy, that like I don't even watch college football, and I don't watch any real NFL other than to see what's going on with my fantasy team, and I'll watch the Vikings games. But I can sit and watch the draft all 3 days for the NFL. I don't watch college basketball, and I barely watch the NBA, but I'll sit and watch the NBA draft. I mean, if the NHL draft were on TV on a station that I got, I'd probably sit and watch it.
It used to be on ESPN too, because I would watch it.
I know.
Did you watch the WNBA draft?
I did not.
Did you watch the WNBA draft?
No.
See, I did. because I have a sickness.
Wow.
Why
That's
wouldn't I?
sad.
It's
I don't
fantastic.
know.
Drafts are fantastic. It's like reality TV meets sports.
So what pick did the Wolves get this in the draft tonight?
They kept 13. If they would have moved up, they would have had to move up to the top 3. If the 14th pick would have moved up, they would have actually had to give their pick to the Suns. So they stayed at 13. The Cavs won. It's the third year out of 4. NBA feels bad for LeBron. Blah 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 blah. The draft is rigged. The draft lottery is. But Kevin Love is going to be the story about for the next 6 weeks with the Timberwolves. We can talk about that later. Anyway, here's what I want to tell you.
All right.
So I was thinking real hard today, and
No.
I'm convinced at this point, so 10:53 p.m. on the 20th, I'm convinced, about 80% convinced, that the Twins will be selecting one of either Tyler Kolek, Nick Gordon, or Alex Jackson.
So another high schooler.
Yes. And I'm not climbing out on a very long limb, but it's going to be a high school. And I know that there's been reports that Nola that they've been focused on him, and they should be. You know, I've seen comps to Mike Leake. I've seen comps to Jared Weaver. But I think when it comes down to it, I think they're going to go the prep route. And it's interesting because I think the guys that they're kind of zeroed in on in the second round may also be prep players and pitchers. So it'll be interesting. I'm excited for picks. Well, obviously the Twins pick, but I'm excited to see what happens kind of the middle of the first round through the comp round, because I almost feel like we're going to see a run on things, and there's so many prep pitchers that if a couple of guys fall through the cracks, I think the Twins are going to get a shot at guys that they have ranked really, really high on their board that make it through the cracks. I'm excited to see how that happens, and that's the other hard part is you have area scouts who answer to their regional supervisor, and then the regional supervisors have to take those reports and then put them together. So even if an area scout loves a guy and the guy's been basically cross-checked and seen, and that his opinion may not weigh heavily enough. And I also think that you get guys that have had, really good years in certain areas that all of a sudden you got to you trust those scouts a little bit more because they've hit what other guys haven't. So it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks, but we're never going to know what the Cubs are thinking it for, and I think that remains the giant wild card.
Yep. The other thing I just mentioned too is as far as the Twins Hangout goes, Jeremy and I are talking about how we're planning on incorporating the draft into a Twins Hangout. Obviously, we'll be on each of the next 2 Tuesdays at 9 o'clock, but we may consider doing something draft related on Thursday, the 5th as well. So well, first of all, feel free to give us some ideas on what type of thing you would like to see, or what would create your interest or pique your interest in terms of draft coverage on the day of the draft or through that weekend, and when you'd want that to happen. So let us know what you think.
Any chance you take that trip down to the cities on Thursday night? No?
Not that I'm aware of, but it could happen if it needed to.
Okay. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah. Who knows what that might mean?
What's up?
Who knows what that might mean?
I don't know. We'll have to keep that one under wraps. Should we wrap it up before we hit the 2-hour mark? I don't have mean, I'll check one more time for some questions. I didn't see anything on the web page.
Do we have a couple on Twitter?
Where are the Twins leading with the 5th pick? Jackson's plus batter, Gordon's high ceiling. Honestly, I think Jackson will be higher on the Twins board. I'm fairly, I say that with conviction. Right now, I believe that. But I think the reason that we didn't see Jackson going to the Twins in most of those expert mock drafts is because he was going earlier. Jackson, Gordon, Kolek's in there. Then he's the wild card because if the Cubs pass, all of a sudden I think the Twins are choosing between 2 guys they really, really like, which is great. It's a great problem to have. Just pick the right one. Correction of what I said earlier. The player's name that was acquired by the Cubs was Aroydis Vizcaino, and he was acquired in the Paul Maholm deal. And Vizcaino was rated in the top 100 prospects by Baseball America and Baseball Prospectus pre-2010, 2011, 2012, and 2013, even though he missed a significant amount of time during those seasons. He's now 23 years old and in Double-A, and he's not terrible. Only 14 innings with a low WHIP, but that's just one example of the Cubs not being afraid of acquiring a guy that was a little bit injured, even though they knew that the ceiling was there. So I'm going to leave it at that. Seth, do you have any final words of advice for our viewers?
I don't, just so people know, we really can't talk about the Twins and Padres game as it's going on due to, I don't know, FCC regulations or for some reason. But obviously they're playing in San Diego, so we're doing that. But anyway, as I say every week, give us your feedback either via Twitter, on Twins Daily, send us an email. Send Jeremy, I think if you want, you can leave your phone number, Jeremy, on here, and people can call you with any questions they have. Yeah.
If you want to see, if you're listening right now, and you want to see Eric Pleiss on Twins Hangouts, let us know. If we get 2 people that say we want to hear him and we want to see him, we'll bring him in. I think that's fair, right? 2 people? 2 people. It's like a vote for Eric thing. I'm sure his brother might be watching right now because he's more of a left coaster. But he didn't ask any crazy questions, so maybe we could have Paul and Eric, and it would be like twins, and then it would be totally cool with iTunes. I don't think it's FCC either. I think it's just MLB because they, watch over us like flocks at night.
There you go.
All right. So
we get done.
We're done. Yeah, unless Paul pops up like right now, and he didn't. So if you watch tonight or if you're listening later, thanks for joining us. It was another Tuesday that Seth and I promised each other earlier to not go 2 full hours, and we did, because that's what we do. We say less than 2 hours, we do 2 hours. So tell your friends, tell your parents. All the good stuff will be live again next Tuesday night. It'll be my birthday, and we'll celebrate and have a good time while Seth drinks giant quantities of water in lieu of the vodka that I might be drinking. So, good talk. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you later.